Here we have a Vespa T5, which is based on the PX 125, but it's a more sportier model. Introduced in 1985 in the UK, and it featured quite a few changes over the PX 125, which I'll go through with you. Now, I might miss some because I'm not a Vespa man really. I'm a Lambretta man, but a lot of the changes are quite visual really. So you've got a smaller front mudguard than the PX. You've got this different horn casting to the normal PX. You've got this spoiler underneath just for show really. The headset is obviously a lot different to the round. They introduced this square headlamp with this visor type wind shield. You had an oddments bin for putting bits and pieces in, but the headset was quite a bit different. A regular headset, or speedo, or binnacle, whatever you'd like to call it, which included obviously a speedometer. Also had a rev counter, which is quite smart, and it red lines at 7.5k. Now, the original Mark 1 T5s had a little digital rev counter, but they introduced this sort of analog rev counter on the later ones, and it had some other warning lights, fuel gauge, etc. But the funny thing is, like the PX had a reserve fuel tap position, but on this model it's either on or off. It's closed at the moment, but there's no reserve. But what you did have, you had a fuel gauge, but you also had a fuel warning light, just to be double sure that it was getting low on fuel. The seat's different. Nice seat, very comfortable seat. And it had these T5 decals, different exhaust. Just about to see that. Floor mats. Instead of the running strips, I don't particularly like these floor mats. But they had floor mats. Different rear lamp. This particular model's on a G-Reg, and I think it's 1989. The engine's exposed. Now, I think the original one had some sort of cover that covered the engine over. Well, this model hasn't got it, and it hasn't got the Ford Sierra, as we used to call them, hubcaps. There's a picture in the Haynes manual, which I'll quickly show you. Yeah, it had these, we used to call them Ford Sierra hubcaps. I think it looks better without them, to be honest. And also, I'll just lift up the back seat. They had a square back. So the normal PX had a sort of rounded back, but they added this, and all they did was a seam there. You see the seams. They obviously just grafted this square back on. Now, I don't know if it's still the same underneath with the rounded. I haven't looked underneath. But they just sort of fabricated this square back on. And I think on the later T5 Classic, they called it, it went back to the round headlamp, and it had the rounded back back part. But one of the main differences is the engine. T5 stands for 5 transfer ports. So I had 5 ports, barrel, and it's only a 125, and they quoted that it was just as fast as a P200E. It might be top speed, I don't know. I've had a P200E, but I know for a fact that the P200E had a lot more torque than this. This tends to rev. Like I say, it revs at 7.5, it red lines at 7.5 K, which I think a PX 200 is probably about 5.5 in standard form. But it had a 5-port Nicosil aluminium barrel. And yeah, for 125 it goes fairly well. Especially back in 1985, with this machine you could ride on L plates for learners in the 80s, whereas before you could ride a 200 with L plates, but that was abolished in 82, I think. And Vespa thought, well, let's try and pep up our 125, and that's what they did with the T5. So it gave it more or less the same performance as a P200E, and they sold really well. You know, I remember back in the day that you used to see them all the time on the roads, but they were all thrashed, like most scooters in the UK. But this one's a Survivor in pretty good condition. It's a very low mileage one. It's only done 1,600 miles from new. So it's in good shape, and it goes very well. There you go, Vespa T5. Thanks for watching.